In a ship engine factory, a massive engine was being transported by an overhead crane when the rigging mechanism suddenly failed. The multi-ton object plummeted from the ceiling toward the factory floor below. One worker was positioned directly beneath the suspended load in the impact zone. Fortunately, he happened to be looking upward at the moment of failure and saw the engine falling, but was able to react quickly and escape the area just before it crashed down. This incident clearly demonstrates that even momentary awareness cannot replace proper exclusion zones around crane operations. No personnel should ever be positioned beneath suspended loads, regardless of circumstances. In a market canteen, a woman wearing a loose-fitting jacket was walking near a sugarcane juicing machine when her clothing became caught in the rotating mechanism. The machine instantly grabbed her jacket and began spinning her entire body around. Fortunately, a man working nearby immediately recognized the emergency and quickly unplugged the machine from its power source, stopping the rotation and preventing further injury to the trapped woman. This incident clearly demonstrates the severe entanglement hazards posed by rotating food processing equipment and loose clothing. All workers operating machinery with moving parts must wear fitted, close-fitting clothing with no loose sleeves, drawstrings, or dangling fabric. Long hair must be tied back and covered. At a shipping port, a mobile crane was attempting to lift and vertically position a massive metal frame structure. However, the weight exceeded the crane's lifting capacity and stability limits, becoming critically unbalanced and completely tipping over and collapsing from the excessive load. The entire crane was destroyed in the incident, though the operator was fortunate enough to escape from the cab without serious injury. This incident clearly demonstrates the catastrophic consequences of exceeding crane load ratings and improper lift planning. All crane operations require detailed lift plans that calculate actual load weights, radius, ground conditions, and equipment capacity before any lift begins. Inside an oil rig facility, 2 workers were conducting pneumatic pressure testing on a system. One worker was checking a specific pipe, while his coworker stood directly in front of its outlet. When the first worker turns a lever, the pipe bursts unexpectedly, releasing an extreme amount of high-pressure gas with explosive force. The worker positioned in front of the outlet was instantly struck, vaporizing him. This incident clearly demonstrates the deadly dangers of standing in line with pressurized equipment discharge points and inadequate pressure testing procedures. All pressure testing must follow strict protocols including gradual pressurization, remote monitoring, and exclusion zones around test areas. On an oil rig, 2 workers entered a personnel lift to be hoisted up the drilling structure. A ground spotter was responsible for guiding the operator through hand signals during the ascent. As the lift rose, the spotter became momentarily distracted, but continued giving signals for the operator to keep raising the men. He failed to notice that the lifting cable had become caught on something. The continued upward tension caused the cable to snap catastrophically. The lift and both workers inside plummeted to the metal deck below, and both men were killed instantly, on impact. This incident clearly demonstrates the fatal consequences of distracted spotting and inadequate communication during lifting operations. Spotters must always maintain visual attention on the entire lift path without any distractions. In a ship manufacturing facility, 2 workers were rigging a large octagonal metal cap to be lifted by an overhead crane. As they prepared the lift, the heavy metal cap became unstable and tipped over, trapping one worker beneath it. The worker remained under the cap for several minutes while his co-workers quickly worked to reattach rigging to it. Once secured, the crane hoisted the cap back up, finally freeing the trapped worker from underneath. This incident clearly demonstrates the critical dangers of unstable loads during rigging operations and inadequate load stabilization. All heavy components must be properly supported, chocked, or blocked to prevent tipping during rigging setup. Workers must never position themselves where falling or tipping loads could pin them. At a waste recycling facility, a worker on his first day was picking materials from the ground when a large shovel loader reversed at high speed behind him. The heavy equipment struck the worker, knocking him down, then drove completely over his body before the operator realized what had happened. Horrified colleagues immediately raised the alarm, and the operator quickly moved the vehicle off the injured man. This incident clearly demonstrates the critical dangers of mixing pedestrian workers with heavy mobile equipment in the same work zones. Vehicles and pedestrians must be segregated through designated walkways, barriers, and exclusion zones. All mobile equipment requires functioning backup alarms, cameras, and spotters during reversing operations. In a phone parts factory, a worker was walking to his workstation when a stack of lithium batteries suddenly sparked and emitted smoke. Co-workers immediately removed unaffected batteries from the stack to prevent the fire from spreading. But it was too late. A domino effect began as batteries ignited one after another. One worker attempted to extinguish the fire with a fire extinguisher, but it was ineffective against the lithium fire. Smoke, flames, and repeated small explosions rapidly engulfed the room. This incident clearly demonstrates the extreme fire hazards of improperly stored lithium batteries and why conventional firefighting methods fail. Lithium batteries require isolated storage in fire-resistant cabinets with proper spacing between units to prevent thermal runaway propagation. At a gas station, a man was with his friends near the outdoor seating area when he lit a cigarette using a match and carelessly discarded the lit match onto the ground. This immediately ignited spilled fuel on the pavement, creating a rapidly expanding trail of flame that spread outward across the ground, causing a fire. Panicked customers and bystanders evacuated the area, while the gas station workers quickly responded with fire extinguishers and successfully extinguished the fire before it reached fuel pumps or caused an explosion. This incident clearly demonstrates the extreme fire hazards present at fuel dispensing facilities and the dangers of open flames near flammable vapors. Fire extinguishers must be readily accessible, and staff must be trained in emergency response. On a drilling rig platform, 3 workers were doing maintenance work on an elevated drill when its metal poles suddenly engaged and rapidly moved without warning, striking all 3 workers simultaneously and knocking them down to the ground. One worker received the most severe impact and remained unable to move, while the other 2 were able to get up and get help. This incident clearly demonstrates the catastrophic dangers of working on equipment with uninsulated energy sources and inadequate body positioning during maintenance. All stored energy, including hydraulic pressure, pneumatic systems, and mechanical tension, must be completely isolated and verified through lockout-tagout procedures before any maintenance work begins. Workers must never position themselves between the closing components of heavy equipment. In a warehouse loading area, a forklift operator was unloading pallets of bottled water from a side-open delivery truck when the truck driver unexpectedly began driving away. The forklift's forks were still engaged with the load inside the truck, and when the truck accelerated, it dragged the forklift along with it. The forklift tipped over onto its side. Fortunately, the operator recognized the danger and was able to exit it before it completely overturned. This incident clearly demonstrates the critical importance of communication protocols and vehicle restraint systems during loading operations. Trucks must have wheel chocks installed and parking brakes engaged before any loading or unloading begins, and clear communication must be established between forklift operators and truck drivers. At a construction site, a crane operator was attempting to position a thin metal structure on top of a building when strong winds caught the lightweight material. The wind overpowered the crane's control, causing the metal structure to swing and descend toward the ground. The structure struck and crushed a worker below who was unable to escape the falling load. Another worker attempted to grab and hold the structure to stop its momentum, while a third worker ran to get emergency help for the crushed colleague. This incident clearly demonstrates the fatal dangers of conducting crane lifts during unsuitable weather conditions and inadequate lift planning for wind-sensitive materials. All crane operations must be halted when wind speeds exceed safe limits specified in lift plans. In a steelworks facility, an overhead crane was lowering a stack of flexible steel sheets using cables and large hooks. 2 workers were acting as spotters to guide the load into position when the steel sheets suddenly flexed violently. The sudden movement caused the hooks to fail and break free, with one hook striking a worker's hard hat with tremendous force, knocking it completely off his head. Fortunately, the hook struck only the hard hat and not the worker's head directly, preventing what could have been a fatal head injury. This incident clearly demonstrates the unpredictable hazards of handling flexible materials and the life-saving importance of proper PPE. Flexible steel sheets can store tremendous energy and release it unpredictably during handling. In an automobile manufacturing facility, 3 workers were conversing near an automated conveyor system equipped with a fixed large moving clamp. One distracted worker had her arm positioned over the conveyor track, and it got caught up by the automated clamp, crushing her arm in the mechanism. Her 2 co-workers immediately attempted to manually pull the clamp back to free her trapped arm, but were unable to generate enough force. They required assistance from another worker to finally release the clamp and extract her severely injured arm, which was bleeding and likely had multiple broken bones. This incident clearly demonstrates the dangers of inadequate machine guarding, poor awareness around automated equipment, and insufficient emergency response capabilities. Emergency stop buttons must be clearly marked and positioned within immediate reach of all work areas. In a recycling facility, a worker was manually sorting through garbage when his arm became trapped in a closing trash compactor. He attempted to pull his arm free, but was unsuccessful. Fortunately, a manager who witnessed the incident immediately rushed over and activated the emergency stop button in the front of the compactor itself, halting it and releasing the worker's trapped arm before it was crushed. This incident clearly demonstrates the critical importance of proper lockout procedures, machine guarding, and training on emergency controls around compacting equipment. All compactors must be de-energized and locked out before any manual sorting or maintenance work occurs inside the compression zone. Physical barriers should prevent workers from reaching into compactor chambers during operation.